very pleased with the announcement coming out of the United States. We have long known that getting our resources to market in safe and responsible ways is an important element for Canadian jobs, for Canadian economic growth. We also recognize that the United States has as a top priority securing stable, reliable sources for their energy with partners, and Canada can be and should be that partner.
Justin Trudeau happy about the Keystone XL pipeline getting the seal of approval from Donald Trump. So is Alberta Premier Rachel Notley. The controversial multi-billion-dollar project by TransCanada will create jobs on both sides of the borders, but there are still roadblocks ahead, and the voices opposed to the pipeline don't plan on backing down anytime soon. We're back with round 3 of the Sunday Scrum. Susan Riley, John Ibbitson, Katie O'Malley, all in Ottawa this morning. Susan, what's your reaction to Donald Trump's giving the thumbs up to the pipeline and then not knowing that there's still some hurdles to cross?
To say the least. I would say about Keystone, it's too much too late. Last week, maybe the week before down in Texas, the CEO of Enbridge, which is the largest pipeline manufacturer on the continent, said that 2 pipelines are enough for the oil sands, that we don't need 3 right now. We probably won't need 3 until the middle of the next decade. As we know, 2 have already been approved. The Enbridge Line 3 expansion, which will take Alberta oil down to Lake Superior, and the more controversial Kinder Morgan, which will take oil from Alberta down to Vancouver Harbour. This pipeline, Keystone, would run Alberta oil right down to the Gulf State refineries, which is where it's already going. Back in November, Rachel Notley, who's loves pipelines, was very lukewarm, almost negative about Keystone, because it doesn't fix her problem. Her mantra, getting oil to tidewater. So in other words, that we're not captive of that one market, the U.S. market. Keystone will simply cement, confirm that captivity. So there's not enough room for 3 pipelines is the bottom line. And to my mind, if you buy, I don't necessarily, but if you buy Rachel Notley's argument that we have to, free ourselves from the U.S.
market,
stranglehold, then you're going to want Kinder Morgan to go first, and that's not going to lead. There's not enough, because the backdrop quickly. A whole bunch of major multinationals have withdrawn activity. They've moved out of the oil sands, however temporarily, and now they're focused on more accessible sources of oil, like in Texas. So there's a slowdown, there's a collapse in the price of oil. The market case for more pipelines is probably not there. I think it's a big mess.
Do you think it's a big mess, John?
No, I think it's a splendid opportunity. This was something that, and it's a pleasure to be able to disagree with Susan again. This is something Conservative government under Stephen Harper have been trying for years to get the Americans to approve, but Barack Obama didn't feel that he could do it, mostly because Hollywood actors were chaining themselves to the fence of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in protest. So I do agree with Susan to the extent that the market will decide this. The market will decide whether pipelines should go to Pacific Tidewater or to Gulf Tidewater, and it will be what it will be. Justin Trudeau's calculation is that if he is all righteous and pure, at least in language, on the question of climate change and carbon taxes on the one side, that he can get away with approving pipelines on the other side. It's going to be very interesting to see how the environmental movement responds to that. Do they give him a pass because he's trying in good faith to implement Stephen Harper's targets on climate change? And by the way, they are Stephen Harper's targets. Or will they start chaining themselves to fences and demanding that we rise up in righteous indignation to keep any of these pipelines from passing? It's always fascinating how in 1 month, in 1 year, approving a pipeline or failing to approve it becomes the most important issue on the planet Earth for a particular movement. And then a couple of years later, we're on to something else.
John, you are surrounded by confusion and disapproval. Katie, you first.
Well, I'm just going to say, it's not as though Justin Trudeau and the Liberals haven't been supportive of Keystone for years. This was always the pipeline that they completely agreed with Stephen Harper. They agreed with the Conservatives. They were, happy the last 4 times Donald Trump said that he was going to approve Keystone, and they're happy now that he's actually signed the deal. As Susan says, at this point, it's almost more a symbolic step forward than it is an actual practical one, because we still don't know sort of when and even if TransCanada is going to get moving on this. And as we've all said, there are all sorts of, since most of the Keystone pipeline is actually, most of it happens in the United States, that's where most of the protests, that's where most of the legal and other challenges are going on. So Canada has been kind of watching from the sidelines on this since the Conservatives were in power. I have to think anyone who was going to vote against Justin Trudeau because of his views on Keystone was already they didn't vote for him in the last election. They're going to continue to not vote for him in the next one. I don't see him taking any more political damage over that particular pipeline. You could argue Kinder Morgan, there was more ambiguity there, but I think definitely with Keystone, it's really just a question of, okay, he's signed the pledge that he's made a couple of times already. Now what happens next? And I think that Rachel Notley and Justin Trudeau are probably both, they're keeping the champagne on ice because no one really knows if this is going to lead to a pipeline really happening or if this is just one more step.
All right.
But this really explodes the fiction, which was heavily promoted by Rachel Notley and endorsed by Justin Trudeau, that somehow pipelines are the key to prosperity for Alberta and by extension for the rest of the Canadian economy. They're not. Continued production in the oil sands will fill revenue holes for sure. The problem in Alberta, though, is the collapse of world oil prices. I mean, those oil sand plants are profitable at $100 a barrel. They're not profitable at $50 a barrel. International Oil knows that, and they've basically fled. They have fled that area before, back in the 90s, and they have come back. But I think the future of oil is very much up in the air. Nobody really knows what's going to happen right now. So to tie your prosperity to pipelines, which are really a neutral vehicle, pipelines that leak are bad, but pipelines that don't leak they're a neutral vehicle, is just folly to me. And if only some of that more effort had been put into developing alternative, cleaner sources of energy.
All right.
Yeah, but it's going to be a very long time before oil goes away. Sometime in the middle of the century, they believe that oil will cease to be the single most important source of energy. It's also what makes it interesting to be a Liberal, because this is a clean issue politically. If you're on the left, you hate pipelines, you hate oil, you hate the oil sands, you hate climate change and everything else. If you're on the right, you love pipelines, you don't care about climate change, and you think the oil sands are wonderful. The Liberals are always trying to do that balancing act of being touchy-feely on the environment on the one side, but pro-pipeline and pro-business on the other. And this is where sometimes they find themselves in a cleft stick.
Katie?
Yeah, I think actually the majority of Canadians and probably people around the world are kind of in that middle area where they can be concerned about pipelines, and they can be concerned about pipelines but also about climate change. So actually in that sense, I think the Liberals are more reflecting a general perception. You can in fact be sort of worried about both and not sure how we're going to proceed forward. I don't think it's really quite as black and white and such a neat division as John lays out.
Yeah, well, the question, we're just getting this question right now. If we're going to talk Keystone, can we challenge the idea that we can ship oil and stop or control climate change? Presumably they mean at the same time. So that's the balancing act that the government is trying to carry on here. We have to take a break at this moment, but the Sunday Scrum will continue in just a moment.
This is not a discussion. This is not a conversation. This is a dictatorship.
The government plans to, quote, modernize the House of Commons, and it has the official opposition comparing Justin Trudeau to Chairman Mao. The NDP is outraged, too. We'll delve into the proposed rule changes, what they are, and why the opposition is so incensed. Coming up on the Sunday Scrum.